At my mom's third wedding, she looked at my kids and said, "Why would you bring them?" Her husband snapped, "They don't belong here. No seats. No food. No spots on the guest list." I pulled her aside, she grinned, "It's my day, not their mess." So I took out my phone, stopped the payments, and said, "Then you can cover your day yourself." The panic? Instant. I was 34 when my own mother looked at my kids like they were trash someone forgot to take out. In that moment, standing in a wedding venue I'd paid for, my entire world shifted, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. The air in that opulent ballroom felt suddenly cold, heavy with a tension only I seemed to feel, a familiar ache deep in my gut. See, I've always been David, the dependable one. Not the golden child, not the rebel. Just the one who showed up, paid the bills, and never complained. Until now. My mother, Eleanor, she's always been addicted to new beginnings, mostly in the form of husbands. This was wedding number 3. My dad, the first, was gone before I even hit middle school. Number 2 was a loudmouth contractor who drank like it was a competitive sport. He lasted 6 years. This latest winner was an accountant named Arthur, with a shiny scalp and a fake smile that never quite reached his eyes. She met him through her Pilates instructor, go figure. Honestly, I hadn't even planned on going. Mom and I hadn't been close for years. After a lifetime of passive-aggressive jabs, guilt trips, and selective memory around holidays, I'd started pulling away. But when she called me 3 months ago, her voice syrupy sweet, I could feel the setup coming before she even asked. "Dave," she'd said, dragging out my name like it pained her. "This wedding's going to be so elegant, simple, tasteful. But the venue, it's just so expensive. I don't want to ask, but you know how Arthur and I are trying to save for the honeymoon." Why did I say yes? Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I still, deep down, craved some maternal approval that always felt just out of reach. I told her I'd cover the venue, the catering, the photography, within reason. I made that crystal clear. The problem is, when Eleanor hears within reason, she translates it to open bar, full-plated dinner, floral arrangements that cost more than my car. Every week there was some new, small thing she needed help with. I pushed back, but somehow, I kept paying. I told myself it was fine, just one day, then I could walk away with a clean conscience. I'd bring my wife, Sarah, and our 2 boys, Liam, who's 7, and Caleb, 4, and we'd just get through it. I should have known better. The first sign that something was seriously off came in the mail. Or, rather, what didn't come. We never got an invitation. Everyone else in the family had received one. My cousins texted me photos of the fancy, gold-trimmed cards with their names beautifully printed, but ours? Nothing. When I called Mom to ask, she laughed. "Oh, you don't need an invitation, Dave. You're paying for the damn thing." It was a joke, I think. Maybe. But it set something off in my chest. That familiar twinge. The quiet alarm I'd learned not to ignore. Still, we showed up. Sarah told me to let it go. "She's your mom. Just let her have her day." And I wanted to believe that. But when we pulled up to the venue, a sprawling vineyard with manicured lawns and those pretentious white chairs lined up under fairy lights, I already felt like an outsider. The parking attendant didn't have our name on the list. Not for the wedding, not for anything. "We're family," I said, confused. He made a face. "Got strict instructions on this one. Only names on the list get valet." "Sorry, sir." We parked on the dirt lot at the far end of the property, next to a delivery van and some overgrown weeds. I lifted Caleb from his car seat while Sarah grabbed Liam's hand, adjusting his little bow tie. The boys were dressed to the nines, both excited to see Grandma in a big white dress. They had no idea. The moment we stepped onto the path toward the reception area, I felt it, that shift in energy. People glanced at us, then looked away. There was no warmth. No, "Hey, Glad you're here. Not even from my mother, who was standing under the pergola, sipping champagne and laughing at something Arthur said. We approached. I gave her a polite nod, hoping to ease the tension. Her eyes landed on Liam and Caleb, then narrowed ever so slightly. She turned to me. David, she said curtly. You brought them? I blinked. Yeah, they're my kids. Arthur, standing behind her, let out a short scoff. This isn't really a place for children, is it? His voice oozed condescension. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. My mother's lips curled into something like a smirk. I just didn't think you'd bring them. It's an adult-only affair. You should have known that. I looked around at the tables, at the elegant setup. No booster seats, no coloring books or kids' menus. No sign our kids were ever expected to be here. You never said that, I replied, keeping my voice even. If it was adults only, you could have told me. I assumed you'd have the sense to ask, she replied with a shrug, sipping her champagne again. It's my day, David. I don't need screaming children ruining the vibe. My ears were burning. Sarah's jaw clenched. I looked at my boys. Caleb clung to my leg, confused. Liam's face fell when he realized something was wrong. Come on, Dave, Arthur added, his tone turning smug. You can just drop them at a sitter or something, right? They're not really welcome here. That word hit me like a physical blow. Welcome. I swallowed hard. So, what are we supposed to do? Just leave? My mother smiled, not kindly. You can stay. They can't. I didn't say anything. I just stood there for a moment, stunned. Sarah knelt to talk to the boys, whispering something calm and gentle. My chest was tight. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and somewhere underneath that, something colder, sharper, like glass forming beneath the surface of ice. I told her we'd talk later and pulled Sarah and the boys aside, out of earshot. We walked toward the car in silence. Liam started to cry once we were out of view, and Caleb kept asking what he did wrong. Sarah kept her composure, but I could see the fury in her eyes. Once the kids were buckled in, I stood alone beside the car. I pulled up my phone, opened the app tied to the wedding expenses, the venue, the photographer, the catering invoice. Thousands, no, tens of thousands of dollars I'd paid up front. My thumb hovered over the screen, and in that moment, I remembered the last thing my mother said before walking away, it's my day. And just like that, something in me snapped. I tapped the screen. One cancellation, then another, then another. And that's when my phone rang. My mom's name on the screen. I didn't answer because I wasn't finished yet. The first call came in less than a minute after I canceled the catering. I was still standing outside the car, staring at the gravel beneath my shoes, wondering how the hell we got here, when my phone buzzed again, and again. 10 missed calls in 5 minutes. One voicemail, then a text from my cousin Chloe, hey, what's going on? The waitstaff just started packing up the food. Then. Another, your mom's freaking out. Did something happen? I didn't reply. I sat in the driver's seat, looked over at Sarah, who was silently holding Caleb while Liam leaned on her shoulder, and started the car. Did you do it? She asked, her voice low. I nodded. Sarah didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just looked out the window and whispered, good. We didn't drive home immediately. We went to a nearby diner, one of those old 24-hour spots with fake leather booths and laminated menus that hadn't changed since the 80s. I ordered the kids pancakes and chocolate milk. Sarah got coffee. I just sat there, staring at the cold condensation on my water glass, trying to sort out what the hell had just happened. That evening, when we finally got back home and the boys were in bed, I checked my phone. 43 missed calls, half from my mother, a handful from Arthur, several from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly acting like we were close. The voicemail was exactly what I expected. A shaky, screechy rant that started with, "How dare you," and somehow got progressively more unhinged. "You've embarrassed me, David, in front of everyone. Do you know how expensive this wedding is? Do you know how hard I worked to make it perfect? This was supposed to be my day, and you ruined it because you couldn't handle being told no. You always do this. You always make it about you." That part made me laugh. Actually laugh. A short, bitter bark of disbelief. Sarah came into the room and sat beside me on the couch. I played the message on speaker. When it ended, she said, "Are you going to call her back?" I shook my head. "You think she'll come here?" "I hope she does." She didn't. Not that night. But the fallout was fast and vicious. The next morning, my sister Ashley texted me a wall of angry messages. Ashley, who I hadn't seen in person since Dad's funeral 3 years ago, suddenly had a lot to say. "You're such a selfish brat. Mom was crying all night. You blindsided her. She didn't deserve that. The food was already paid for. You just wanted attention, like always. Grow up, David." It was one day. Ashley had always played the role of the peacemaker, but not for me. Only for Mom. She's the one who gets invited to Mother's Day brunches, who gets handwritten cards and Instagram shoutouts. I was the one who always got, "I love all my kids equally," while being asked to Venmo $300 just for a little help this month. But this was something else. I didn't respond to Ashley either. What could I even say that would matter? Over the next few days, I started getting messages from other relatives. Some were just confused, asking what happened. Others were passive-aggressive. "We all have family drama, but ruining a wedding? Really? Next time, just leave if you're upset. She was just trying to have boundaries, David." It wasn't personal. But it was personal. And none of them were there to see the look on her face. The way she dismissed my kids like they were stray animals, like they didn't belong. That stuck with me. It stuck when I saw Liam draw a picture the next day of Grandma's castle with a giant red X over it. It stuck when Caleb asked me, "Is Grandma mad at me?" It stuck when I realized Sarah hadn't said, "I told you so," even once, because she knew I was already thinking it. And then came the breaking point. A week later, I got a formal-looking letter in the mail. No return address, just my name on the envelope in neat handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed bullet points like a checklist. It read, "Reimbursement request for wedding disruption. Cancelled catering, $7,850. Lost photography deposit, $1,200. Decor damages, floral arrangements, linens, etc. $1,035. Guest compensation, refunds for travel $2,500. Emotional distress, $3,000. Total due, $15,585. Please remit within 14 business days." At the bottom was Arthur's signature, not my mother's, his. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting there to be a punchline, but nope, it was real. They were invoicing me for emotional damages. Sarah was in the kitchen when I walked in with the letter. I handed it to her without a word. She read it slowly, then looked at me, and for the first time since the wedding, she smiled. A full, amused, slightly wicked smile. Oh, they have no idea who they just messed with. I didn't smile back. Not yet. Because as absurd as it was, it also hurt deeply. My own mother couldn't be bothered to sign her name. She made Arthur do it, like I wasn't even worth addressing directly anymore. Like I was nothing more than an ATM that had finally run dry. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down at my computer, and opened an old file I hadn't touched in years. A spreadsheet. Back when I started helping my mom financially, I kept track of everything. Rent, utility bills, groceries, school supplies for Ashley's kids when she forgot to buy them. Car repairs, birthday parties, Christmas decorations, wedding expenses, all of it. The total came to just over $92,000. I stared at that number, felt it, let it sink into my bones. Then I opened a new document, a letter, and I started typing. But before I could finish, my phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from my Aunt Susan, the only one in the family who hadn't said a word since the wedding. Her message read, "Just saw the photos on Facebook. Your mom didn't even tell people you weren't there. Said you left because the kids were fussy. She's rewriting the story." That was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized that this wasn't just about one day. This was a lifetime of being erased, undervalued, used. I looked at the photos. There she was, grinning with Arthur under a flower arch I paid for, cutting a cake I paid for, toasting with champagne I bought. No mention of me. No sign of my kids. In the comments, people were saying, "Beautiful wedding and so elegant. Your son must be so proud." Someone even tagged me, saying, "You must have had a blast." She deleted the comment. I showed Sarah. She didn't say anything, just leaned her head against my shoulder. "She's never going to change," she said softly. And that was the part that hurt the most, because she was right. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the photo, opened the letter again, and kept typing. But I wasn't just planning to write her back. I was planning everything. Because if my mother wanted a clean break, if she wanted to pretend we didn't exist, if she wanted to turn her own grandkids away like they were nothing, then maybe it was time to make it real for good. Rock bottom doesn't always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just you sitting in your car outside a grocery store at 8:47 p.m., realizing you've been parked for 23 minutes and haven't moved. Just staring at the steering wheel, wondering how you got here, wondering how many more times you'll have to explain to your son that, no, Grandma isn't mad at him. She's just complicated. After the wedding debacle and Arthur's invoice, I expected the situation to die down. I thought maybe once she cooled off, my mother would reach out. Maybe she'd offer some kind of half apology. Maybe she'd just want to talk. But instead, she did what she's always done best, rewrote the narrative and locked me out of it. She told everyone I had an episode, that Sarah and I stormed out because we didn't like our seats, that the kids were screaming and out of control, and that I made a scene for attention. I didn't even know the full extent of what she said until an old high school buddy, Michael, who now lived 2 states over, sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post. My mother had tagged herself at a wine bar with the caption, "Finally free of the drama. Here's to peace, love, and surrounding yourself with people who don't poison the energy." Poison. That's what I was now. The worst part? People believed her. Maybe not everyone, but enough. Ashley did. My Aunt Brenda did. A few cousins who used to text me every Thanksgiving just stopped. At first, I tried to brush it off. I focused on the kids. Helped Liam with his science fair project. Took Caleb to the park more often. Sarah and I stayed busy, but it was like living with a pressure cooker sealed tight. Something was going to burst, and I could feel it coming from inside me. I started sleeping less, eating less. I snapped more easily at work, at home. One morning, I heard Liam telling Caleb, "Don't bother Dad when he's typing, that's when he gets grumpy." And it hit me like a punch to the gut. That weekend, Sarah sat me down. No judgment, no anger, just her and that steady, calm voice I've always relied on. "You've been carrying this for too long, Dave," she said. "Your mom has been treating you like this for years. You didn't break something. You stopped pretending it wasn't broken. I looked at her and said, "Then why do I feel like I'm the one falling apart?" She took my hand. "Because for the first time, you're not ignoring it." That night, after the kids were in bed, I pulled out that spreadsheet again, the one with the expenses. I stared at that $92,000 total. All those years of covering for my mom, all the small favors, the late-night Venmos, the just until next week I owe you that never came back. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the pattern, the decades of emotional debt she'd racked up, always expecting me to pay it down. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. At first, it felt stupid, but after a few entries, it started to pour out. Memories I'd buried. Christmases where Ashley got brand new gifts while I unwrapped socks. My high school graduation, how mom was late because she lost track of time at brunch with husband number one. The way she always made me feel like I was a guest in my own family. The realization that I was never the son she wanted. I was the one she needed when things went wrong, and she punished me for it every chance she got. But something strange happened as I kept writing. The more I dug into the truth of how she treated me, the less shame I felt. The guilt started to lift. The stories I'd been telling myself, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe I deserved it, started to lose their grip. And in that space where the guilt had been, something new started to grow. Clarity. I didn't owe her my silence anymore, or my money, or my place at her table. That's when I made a decision. I emailed Arthur. I didn't bother replying to the invoice. Instead, I sent him a formal letter on legal stationery politely informing him that I had records of every payment I'd made for the wedding, along with years of documented financial support to Eleanor. I attached the spreadsheet. I highlighted the $92,000 total. Then I added this: "If you or Eleanor wish to pursue reimbursement for the event, I'll be happy to counterclaim for the unpaid debt. I've already spoken to a legal advisor." They never responded. That was the first real win. The second came a few weeks later. I got an email from a small publishing site I'd followed for years. I'd submitted a short piece from my journal, an edited entry written like an essay, a personal reflection on parental narcissism and emotional enmeshment. They wanted to feature it. Said it was raw, compelling, and timely. They paid me $150. Nothing huge, but it felt like $1,000,000. I told Sarah about it over dinner. She smiled and said, "You should write more. You have things to say." So, I did. I started waking up early, before the kids, before work, just me, the keyboard, and the sound of birds outside the window. It wasn't always pretty, and sometimes I'd just stare at the screen. But over time, the words came easier. And something even better started to happen. People read it. Comments poured in. Messages from strangers saying, "This is my story, too." One woman wrote, "I thought I was crazy until I read this. Thank you." Another man said, "I haven't talked to my mother in 10 years, and now I understand why that's okay." I was being seen. Not as a failure, not as the villain in my mother's story, but as a whole person. Flawed, wounded, healing. It was addictive in the best way. I started my own blog, just a free WordPress site. I called it The Other Sun, a place for people like me. People whose family trees had thorns, whose mothers wore masks and called it makeup. Sarah helped with the layout. Liam made the logo in Canva. He drew a tree with a broken branch, but strong roots. I cried when I saw it. My therapist, I started therapy, too, said it was the healthiest thing I'd done in years. And then, about 2 months after the wedding, Ashley reached out. Just a single text, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to scream at her for siding with Mom, for blaming me, for believing Arthur and his stupid invoice. But a smaller part of me, one that still remembered sleepovers and bike rides and that one summer we built a pillow fort that took up the entire living room, said, "Just listen." We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. She looked tired, older somehow, like life had been catching up to her, too. "Before I say anything," she said, wrapping her hands around her cup, "I want you to know I was wrong." I said nothing. Just waited. I believed her, she continued. I always do. But then I talked to Aunt Susan. She showed me your blog. I didn't know. I didn't want to know. But I read it. All of it. She looked up. Her eyes were glassy. "David, I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you. It wasn't an instant fix. Apologies rarely are. But it mattered. It mattered more than I expected." We talked for hours. She admitted Mom had started turning on her now, criticizing her parenting, calling her too sensitive, telling her she was lucky to have a brother like me who never makes a fuss. It was always the same game: divide, manipulate, control. But the spell was breaking. Ashley left that day with a hug and a promise to stay in touch, and this time, she meant it. Over the next month, more shifts happened. Aunt Susan shared my blog with a friend who worked in media. A podcast reached out, wanting to interview me about toxic family dynamics. A college invited me to speak to a sociology class. I wasn't a professional, just a guy with a story, but apparently that was enough. I never saw it coming. And still, even with all that growth, even as I rebuilt myself from the ashes of a wedding I wasn't welcome at, there was one thing I couldn't shake. My mother's silence. She never called, never wrote, never showed up. It was like I had been scrubbed from her world. Like she was pretending I never existed. Not even the grandkids. No cards, no birthdays, no oops, I forgot texts. And yet, I didn't miss her. Not really. I missed the idea of her. The version of her I used to pretend existed. The one I built out of scraps and hope. But not the real woman. Not the one who looked my kids in the face and said they weren't welcome. That woman, she could stay silent, because I was done chasing her voice. And yet, just as the wounds began to close, just as I started to feel like I had a handle on life again, that's when the letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A real envelope, handwritten, mailed to my home address. No return name, but I recognized the handwriting immediately, slanted, sharp, my name across the front in blue ink. It was from her. Sarah found it in the mailbox and brought it in. I held it for a long time, just stared at it. "Are you going to open it?" she asked. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I already knew. Whatever was inside that envelope, it was going to change everything. The envelope sat on our dining table for 3 days. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I passed it, walking to the kitchen, helping Caleb with his coloring books, setting the table for dinner, I'd glance at it like it was ticking. A little landmine in the middle of our otherwise peaceful home. The handwriting was neat, practiced, just like her, controlled, careful, deceptively calm. Sarah never pushed. She just noticed the way my eyes lingered and gave me space. On the third night, after the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet, she walked over, picked up the letter, and gently placed it in my hand. "Whatever it says," she told me, "it doesn't define you." I nodded, sat down, and opened it. There was no greeting. No "Dear David," no "I've been thinking." Just one long page, every line calculated. "I'm sorry things got so out of hand. That wasn't the wedding I imagined. But I was under a lot of pressure, and you have to understand that you blindsided me. You always had a flair for the dramatic. I wanted that day to be about me for once, and instead you made it about your children. They didn't belong there, David. It wasn't personal. It was aesthetic. You took something small and made it a war. You hurt me deeply. I don't know how we move forward from here unless you take accountability for that. No apology. Just that classic, twisted, narcissistic non-apology. The kind where every sentence starts like she might own something and ends with it being my fault. And aesthetic. She called my kids aesthetic clutter. I stood up, walked outside onto the porch, and just breathed. The air was cool and sharp. Somewhere across the street, a neighbor's wind chime clinked in the dark. When I walked back inside, I tossed the letter into the trash. I didn't say a word, but I didn't sleep that night either, because something had shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was clear. Crystal clear. This wasn't just a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern, a cycle. And I was done being the well-behaved son in the shadows. The one who absorbed her cruelty and kept the family from seeing the cracks. If she wanted to play cold, I could be colder. But not reckless. This time, it wouldn't be emotional. It would be methodical. And it wouldn't be loud. No screaming matches, no ugly texts. This would be quiet, surgical. The first thing I did was print out the letter. Then I highlighted every manipulative phrase, every line where she shifted blame. Then I added it to a folder, physical and digital, called Closure. In that folder, I began compiling everything. Years of text messages, voicemails, financial records. Screenshots of our family group chat where she belittled me. Birthday party photos she skipped. Messages from Ashley and Susan confirming how she'd rewritten the wedding story. I wasn't collecting dirt out of spite. I was collecting evidence. Truth. Because if this woman was going to try to destroy my reputation behind closed doors, I needed insurance. But I didn't stop there. I started reaching out to the people she thought were hers. Not in a petty way, not to expose her, just to reconnect. I invited Aunt Susan over for dinner. She brought dessert and tears. Said she'd known for years something was wrong, but hadn't wanted to get in the middle. I told her gently, there is no middle. There's just what happened. Then I reached out to Cousin Evan. He'd always been more neutral, kept his head down. We met for lunch. I told him the full story, showed him the letter. He went pale. She told everyone you canceled the wedding food because the kids spilled juice on her dress, he said. I laughed, not bitterly, just because it was so her. And Evan, to his credit, looked me in the eye and said, I believe you, man. I always wondered why your side never made sense. The more I spoke up, the more people started to question what they'd been told. Turns out my mother's greatest weapon had always been my silence. Once that was gone, her version of things started to crack. Then came the real opportunity. It started with a phone call from Chloe, my cousin who'd texted me during the wedding fallout. Okay, this might sound nuts, she said, but I think you should know Grandma's house is being sold. My stomach dropped. That house wasn't just real estate. It was the family anchor. My grandparents had lived there for 40 years. After they passed, the house became this unspoken symbol of stability. My mom and her siblings always argued about what to do with it. But it was agreed it wouldn't be sold for at least a few more years. Mostly because everyone assumed my mom would eventually live there. Now it was on the market. Quietly. No family-wide discussion, no group decision. Eleanor is pushing for a quick cash out, Chloe said. Arthur found a buyer already. Some LLC. I asked for the address of the buyer's agent. Then I made a call. And that's when I found out the LLC wasn't some random buyer. It was her. My mother, hiding the purchase behind a shell company so she could buy the house herself, transfer it to Arthur's name, and keep it in the family, her family. No siblings, no cousins, just her. I asked the agent if the property was still in contingency. It was. And I asked one more question, what would it take for me to make a competing offer? Because here's the thing. Years ago, before the wedding drama, before therapy, before all the chaos, I started putting aside a little savings. Nothing dramatic, just quiet planning. A separate account in my name only, emergency funds, side gig income, some freelance money. I never had a plan for it. I just needed to know I had something that was mine. Turns out I had just enough to make a competitive offer, more than Arthur's shell company, and I knew exactly who to call to help me draft it. Michael, the high school friend who sent me the Facebook screenshot, was now a real estate lawyer. When I told him everything, he practically cackled. "This is next level poetic, dude." He helped me prep the paperwork, make the offer, and keep everything airtight. By the time Arthur and my mother caught wind of it, it was too late. The seller had accepted my bid. And the best part? I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, I waited, because I had one more card to play. The blog. Since my first post went live, the other son had gained traction. Hundreds of subscribers. Dozens of guest posts from others sharing their stories. It had quietly become a community, a lifeline for people estranged from toxic parents. So, I planned a new series, What Happens When You Stop Playing Their Game. It would be personal, detailed, but anonymous enough to keep the peace until I chose otherwise. And at the end of it, a reveal. Not to shame, to free myself. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. This was about reclaiming the narrative. No more whisper campaigns. No more lies about fussy kids or aesthetic issues. No more rewriting history. This time, I was writing it myself. And just as the post was about to go live, just as the ink dried on the house contract, just as the final domino lined up, I got another message from Ashley. One sentence, "You're not going to believe what she just did." I stared at the screen. The storm wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. Ashley's message hit right as I was about to post the final blog entry. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, cursor blinking on the draft that would mark the end of this quiet war. I'd written and rewritten that last paragraph at least 10 times, tweaking the tone, softening certain edges. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't neutral either. What I had now was focus. Still. I paused when I saw her message. "You're not going to believe what she just did." I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring. "She's contesting the house sale." Ashley blurted out. "She's trying to claim the offer process was unfair, that the seller was biased, that the buyer, you, violated some kind of family clause." I blinked. Family clause? "She made it up, David," Ashley said. "She's saying the house was supposed to stay in Eleanor's bloodline, whatever that means. And she told Aunt Brenda you manipulated the listing agent." I rubbed my temples. "She knows I bought the house?" "Yeah, Arthur's lawyer found the paperwork." I should have expected it. Arthur was nosy and paranoid, the kind of guy who double-checks locks twice after leaving a hotel room. I imagined him flipping through property records like a scavenger and then storming into their kitchen with the news, "It's him. It's David. He bought it." I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said. "Let her challenge it." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Because here's what she didn't know. The seller, a widow named Martha, had met me in person before signing. I hadn't just submitted a faceless bid. I went to her home, sat on her floral couch, and listened to her talk about memories in that house. I showed her pictures of my kids, told her how much it meant to keep the place rooted in family, even if that family looked different now. Martha reminded me of my grandmother. Gentle voice, kind eyes, smelled like lavender and peppermint. When I told her I wanted the house because it was where every good childhood memory lived, she patted my hand and said, "Then that's where it should stay." So, no, Eleanor didn't have a leg to stand on, legally or morally. But I wasn't just going to win. I was going to close the chapter. So, I clicked publish. The blog post went live at 11:08 p.m. on a Sunday. The title was simple, My Mother's Third Wedding, the Day I Stopped Pretending. It was the most personal thing I'd ever written. I didn't use real names. I didn't need to. The story itself was clear. A man who funded his mother's wedding, brought his children, and was told on the day of the event they weren't welcome. The twist? He quietly cancelled the payments, walked away, and rebuilt everything she tried to tear down. The ending hinted at the house, at how sometimes fate puts the keys back in your hand. I went to bed afterward with a strange calmness in my chest. Not joy, not vengeance. Just peace. The next morning, the post had 48,000 views. By noon, it had been shared on 3 narcissistic support forums, 2 parenting support groups, and 1 Reddit thread titled, This Man Got the Ultimate Revenge Without Raising His Voice. Sarah read through the comments that night, eyes wide. They're calling you the CEO of Silent Payback, she said, laughing. I smiled. For once, I didn't feel weird accepting praise because it wasn't about being petty. It was about finally being honest. The fallout came quickly. 3 days after the post went viral, I got a call from Aunt Brenda. David, she said cautiously, your mother's in damage control mode. I bet she was. She had no proof it was about her, but she knew. People started calling her, messaging, asking pointed questions. Was that about you? Did you really say that about his kids? Why didn't he get an invite? She denied everything, of course. Claimed it was internet fiction and just a bitter exaggeration. But she slipped. She sent Ashley a text that said, tell him to take that down or I'll sue for defamation. Ashley sent me a screenshot. I replied with a single line, truth isn't defamation. And then, silence. Not just from her, but from Arthur, too. Which was odd because I figured he'd be the one foaming at the mouth. Then Ashley called again. You're not going to believe this, she said. You keep saying that, I replied. She laughed, but it was hollow. Then she told me. Arthur left. Walked out 2 nights after the blog went viral. Apparently, he wasn't just angry about the post. He was angry because, in his words, you lied to me. You told me he was the unstable one, but he played you like a violin. He packed a bag, said he was tired of cleaning up her messes, and moved into a hotel. And here's the kicker, the money for the wedding, the money I cancelled? Turns out Eleanor had been telling Arthur that she paid for most of it. Claimed I only covered a few small things. When the charges were reversed and vendors pulled out, she told Arthur it was a misunderstanding. But the receipts, my receipts, went public when the blog did. He read the post. He saw the screenshots. And he realized he'd been married to a lie. I didn't gloat. Didn't post a victory lap. Didn't say a word online. But I did take one more step. I invited Ashley and her kids to the new house, the old family home. We ordered pizza, let the kids run in the yard, watched them chase each other around the oak tree that Grandpa planted back in '81. Ashley stood beside me on the porch, sipping a glass of wine. I can't believe she let this go, she said softly. She didn't, I replied. She lost it. She nodded. Think she'll ever reach out again? I shrugged. Probably when she wants something. What are you going to say when she does? I thought about it. About the years of silence, the emotional manipulation, the wedding, the invoice, the letter. And I looked at Ashley and said nothing. I already said everything I needed to say. And I had. I'd written the story, taken back the house, protected my kids, healed my voice. I didn't need a final confrontation. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her approval. I just needed one last thing. I walked back inside, opened my laptop, and updated the final line of the blog post. It used to read, "Some doors stay closed because we're afraid. Others stay closed because we never realized we were holding the key all along." I changed it to, "I held the key, and I used it not to open her door, but to close mine." What would you have done?